How do you know how much fuel is left in your vehicle? Well, we could look down inside and see where the fuel level is. We could measure the amount of fuel left. Some vehicles actually came with a calibrated stick that you could stick down in the fuel tank. It would tell you this many gallons are left. But I think most of us just like using the gauge. So this is our fuel sending unit. This is what sits down inside the tank. We've got our pickup line here, and this is a fuel return line for excess fuel, I guess, in the system. You can see I've added this. This screen actually came off and fell off and was sitting in the bottom of the tank. The rubber had completely just melted away sitting in there. So I've got some submersible fuel line in there now. One of the issues I was having is it would run out at about half a tank, and that's why that length was missing. As part of the fuel sending unit, we've got this float that goes in there like that. So that would be full, and this would be empty down there. You can see it sweeps across the back there. It also sweeps across this roll of wire. You can see that it broke at some point in there, and it's all kind of come apart. There's a couple reasons this fuel gauge wasn't working, but that's probably a big one there. So I wanted to show you how cool this was. I bought this one originally. This is 34 gauge nichrome wire. The measurement I took off of the original winding was kind of in between the 34 gauge and the 36 gauge as far as the resistance per foot that was needed. And I went with the bigger wire thinking, well, if it broke before, you know, maybe the thicker wire would be better. I could not get this wound tight enough to get it to work. The gauge would read about half a tank when it was, you know, all the way up on full. So ended up going with the 36 gauge wire, but there's a resistance across this wire, and so if you're in the ohms on your multimeter, you'll be able to see we got 46 ohms there at, I don't know, 2 feet, 2.5 feet, something like that. You can slide it up, it'll decrease and keep decreasing. This is how that gauge is reading where that float is, the position of the float. I needed about 11.5 feet of wire, which is longer than the tractor itself. And so what we do is we wind it around something. Here's a very crude example. If we go from that end to that end, it should be, yeah, about 174. I think the max ohms I was aiming for was 192 or something like that, and that will read full on the gas tank. The biggest issue I had with winding this wire around was you need to get a long enough length to meet the required resistance for the gauge to read correctly. But in order to get that length, you've got to wind the wire extremely tight on itself, but not tight enough that it touches the wire next to it or the wind next to itself, because then it just shorts out and you're not getting the length of wire that you need across the wind. So I finally got that done. Man, that took me 9 tries of winding that wire to get that right. So you can see that piece I was winding is sitting down in there. The idea is that float moves up with the fuel level, it's going to change the resistance in that wire, and that's how that gauge reads where the fuel level is. I'm embarrassed to say I had to invest in one of these. I don't feel that old, but man, they were helpful. Okay, I think it's ready to be installed again. I was testing continuity between this end and the end that goes up into the dash, and there was a break somewhere. So fix that. Alright, so this is just going to drop down into the fuel tank there. And here we can see we've got our extra couple of inches. That'll be helpful. So when this reads 0 or empty, it's actually empty instead of up by half or whatever. So now here we are at empty. If we sweep the float, there's about half full. And back to empty.